You've got the Lions going 13-4. I have them going a similar 13-4. Where do you have this team ending up when it's all said and done?
You want me to just jump right all the way to the end of it here? So I've got the Lions as my NFC champion. I think I have them coming out. I think it's going to be, look, San Francisco's been at the top. I think there's some vibes there. I'm a little worried about the Trent Williams situation. That's still not resolved. I'm worried about their offensive line and the vibes there. I think Philadelphia is in for a bounce back. I know Atlanta's got Kirk Cousins, but I see a level of stability here. And I think from the playoff loss last year, look, it's very rare, I should say, for teams to make championship runs on their first run, right? Sometimes you got to get in the playoffs, got to get a little bit calloused, right? Like, they're not all Tom Brady where they just walk in and just win Super Bowls right away, right? You know, even Patrick Mahomes didn't win it in his first run. He got beat by Brady in just a classic AFC title game, and then came back the next year and then won it. So get a little callous, get a little bruised up. So my Super Bowl matchup is Lions and Chiefs. All right, which means, and I don't usually, I'm not one, I don't like betting on things that have never happened before. But one way or the other in that matchup, we're going to get something that's never happened before, right? So do we want the winner prediction now? Are we doing this now? Or how do you want to do this? Or do you
I have the Lions winning the Super Bowl.
I also I took the same thing. I took the Lions.
Oh.
I have the Lions, which means now, since we both picked them, now they're probably not going to win it. But I took it. I was like, is it a three-peat, or do we get? And for me, I think, you know, part of it too is just the symmetry of, like, this is where it all started week 1 last year, where they beat the Chiefs in week 1 in Kansas City on Thursday night, right? And I think obviously Chris Jones was out in that game, and some fluky things happened, you know, to the Chiefs for sure. But Lions still went in there and won that game. And I think the stability, coaching staff, Ben Johnson staying for another year is massive, because he easily could have taken a head coaching job. Quarterback, Jared Goff, like him or not, especially behind this offensive line, that's at least a top 12 quarterback. And one of the best quarterbacks in the league in a clean pocket. You have all-star playmakers, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Their defense is getting better, and I like the way they attacked the secondary this offseason, right? Especially overhauling the cornerback room, free agency, trades, draft, all that stuff we're going to get into. It feels like if they were going to do it, this is the moment, right? You got off a tough loss last year in San Francisco. If they had a good secondary last year, not even like the best secondary in football, they were 30th in coverage grade last year. If they had a good secondary last year, they would have finished off that San Francisco game. They would have been in the Super Bowl, and then you just see where it goes in a game like that. And they already beat the Chiefs once, right? So I'm going with the Lions. I'm taking the Lions all the way. And my offensive MVP for all those big-name guys I just mentioned, Trevor, last year, when you look at the offensive tackle grading leaderboards, for the first time since 2019, Trent Williams wasn't at the top. It was Lions right tackle Penei Sewell, who's been talked up as this offensive line prodigy. He's going to be the best tackle in the league, coming out of Oregon and all this talent. And they switch him to the right side, which was a whole controversy at that time, but it doesn't matter. 92.8 overall grade, 95.1 run blocking grade, led all offensive linemen last year, not just tackles. And this, he's this good. They're the best offensive line in football, especially now that Jason Kelsey's retired in Philadelphia. You've got stars. Taylor Decker, Frank Ragnow is arguably the best center in football. Penei Sewell might be the best offensive lineman in football. This offensive line with Goff and these weapons in the run game, that's what makes them go. And they made a point when Dan Campbell got there. Look, we're building this offensive line. This front five is going to be the best unit in football this year. They are heading into the season, obviously, as long as they're healthy. But Sewell's a monster. This is now a monster. And if you're grading higher than Trent Williams, I have to take it, because Trent Williams, on the offensive line, Trent Williams is the PFF god, and Sewell might be the new one.
We have a metric at PFF, wins above replacement, wins above average, however you want to say it. Penei Sewell last year had a 0.68 wins above average metric. That was the number one of all offensive tackles. And as you were talking there, I just went back all the way to 2010. And it's the highest mark that we've had in that metric since 2010. That's how valuable Penei Sewell was for this team last year, to just put it in perspective, and how much better he was than any sort of like average offensive tackle in the NFL. So he's an absolute monster. And that was even, higher than the Trent Williams year, 2 years ago, where he graded out at like a 97.5 or something absolutely crazy. Sewell's wins above replacement metric was even higher, and his score was even higher last year than it was for that Trent Williams year. My offensive MVP, I got to go with Jared Goff. It has to be Jared Goff. I mean, him and Ben Johnson were one of the best quarterback offensive coordinator combinations that we have in this league. I don't know if I want to say best, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they're not too bad themselves, but yeah, it's one of the best, and they give themselves a chance to win every single week, no matter what the defensive matchup is. And Goff has played brilliantly in Ben Johnson's offense. Now, of course, there are the areas where Goff, I think, needs to get better, and I would love for him to get better this upcoming season. I think the continuity and chemistry that he has with Ben Johnson can allow him to do so, but Goff, 84.3 passing grade last year. That was sixth best in the NFL. But I will say this, 13 of Goff's 17 turnover-worthy plays last year came when he was under pressure. That is the criticism of Jared Goff. He is excellent when he is within structure, and him and Ben Johnson have a great chemistry when things are going really well. And when you said they have the best offensive line in football, you're in structure quite a bit. And so obviously you see a lot of really great results. But when he is out of structure, when he is pressured, I need his floor to be higher this year. That is what will get them to the Super Bowl, and that is what will allow them to win the Super Bowl. If that floor for Goff when he is pressured is higher this year than what it was last year, because we already know that the ceiling itself is good enough to beat a lot of really good defenses and a lot of really good teams this year. So Goff, great year last year. I think he could have an even better season this year. It's just got to be better, particularly under pressure, and I think he's the MVP that can get this team to the Super Bowl. What about defensive MVP for the Detroit Lions?
The secondary is going to be a big X factor for them as far as where they perform, but the one guy for me that's a constant for them, Aiden Hutchinson's one of the elite pass rushers in the league. You talk about a guy, 101 pressures in the regular season last year, second in the NFL, I believe, behind Micah Parsons. 91.4 pass rush grade, was fifth best in the NFL. Trevor, you tell me this. To this day, I am shocked still that he didn't go first overall in 22. I really am. I know Trayvon Walker had the big combine and he's the athlete and all. I thought Aiden Hutchinson was clearly the best player in that draft. He was the best player in the country during the college season in 21. I remember what he did against Ohio State. I believe he had 15 pressures in the Ohio State game in 2021. Maybe it might have been the best game I've ever seen an edge defender play. Which is key,
because not only is it a big game, but it's a rivalry game. And it's like you want to see your prospects play their best in the biggest game. So that's huge.
In the biggest moments, he was the best player on the field. You can be the best player on the field against Rutgers, against Minnesota, against whoever else. You're the best player on the field clearly in that game. That shows you something. And he was the best player all that year. I thought he could have been in the Heisman race with how good he was that year. And then it's just continued with the Lions. He's one of the best pass rushers in football. He's one of the best playmakers in football. I think I was grading a Lions game last year. We had an interception on a screen, and he read a screen and picked it off. I'm like, this guy's special. He's not just good. He's special. I think he's one of the special pass rushers that we talk about when we talk about Parsons and Garrett and Watt and all these guys. So much so, actually, Trevor, that he is my pick to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think Aiden Hutchinson, the ceiling on this guy and how much he works and the pass rush arsenal, he's got a spin move that's just absolutely unfair. I'm taking Aiden Hutchinson for Defensive Player of the Year. I think this defensive line, and he's got DJ Reader in there on the inside now, I think they're going to take another leap forward, and I think Hutchinson's going to establish himself now as, like, if you don't think of him in the class with those elite guys, with Garrett and Parsons and Crosby and all those guys, you're going to by the end of this year. He's one of the best players in football.
I absolutely love it. It's given Hutchinson his flowers, and I think that he absolutely deserves it, because it was a good pass rush class that he was coming out in. And you're right. I think he got drafted lower than he should have, and obviously he's outplaying that draft status, no doubt about it. But so defensive MVP, I think Hutchinson's going to be a stud. I think DJ Reader's going to be a stud for this team, a great addition to the defensive line. But you mentioned the coverage group for the Detroit Lions. If it was just average, they're probably making the Super Bowl last year. 55.2 coverage grade as a team last season. That means that I think that their defensive secondary additions this past year have to sort of be the MVP, because I think a lot of the rest of it is there. And specifically, I say at the cornerback position, they've got the safeties that played really well last year. Brian Branch, I know he's got sort of that like hybrid slot defender, but Ifeatu Melifonwu, Kirby Joseph, right? I think those guys are great on the back end as well, and you kind of get to roam Brian Branch around. I think Brian Branch is going to have a great year. But specifically, the defensive MVPs for this team, in my opinion, Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson. These are two guys that they traded for one, they signed one. They've got to be some of the best players on that defense, in my opinion, because the coverage group from the secondary, the corners specifically, just has to be much better. Carlton Davis, sort of seen as this like shutdown corner, especially when Tampa Bay was winning their Super Bowl, going on the Super Bowl run, but his career high single season coverage grade is 73.8, which isn't terrible. That's good. Obviously, if he could replicate that in Detroit, I think that's probably good enough for this team. But it's not like Davis has been this elite top tier shutdown corner, even when he was playing at his highs in Todd Bowles' defense. So I think we need to sort of temper expectations a little bit with Davis, especially because the last 2 years he's been hurt. He's been in and out of the lineup. He hasn't been as good. That's why Tampa was willing to move on from him, despite the fact that they are competing for division still currently. I like Amik Robertson as well, but those two guys are the defensive MVPs for me. Those are the most valuable players because if they hit, the rest of it's there, in my opinion. And if they don't, we're going to have the same exact questions. And unfortunately, I feel like we might be saying that, man, if only the corners were better once again this year if Detroit does not make it to the Super Bowl. So I hope those guys play really well because I think the rest of it is there for them. What about a breakout player for this team?
I think coverage being the theme, and I'm gonna go to linebacker for this one. And Jack Campbell, last year's first round pick. A lot of people questioned this pick. Like, are we still in an era where we can take linebackers in the first round, 18th overall, right? And Campbell, look, he was well adjusted in run defense last year and had a 75.8 run defense grade, and they were kind of, his role was weird early in the year because they were trying to figure out what to do with him, and there was even a few games in the middle of the season where he was actually playing off the edge more than he was playing linebacker, right? And one way or the other, he proved he was a good run defender, but the surprising thing was that he was a major liability in coverage in his rookie year, and his last year in college in 2022 at Iowa, he led the nation in coverage grade. He was the highest graded coverage linebacker in the country. Now, the Lions' defense is a lot different than Iowa's defense. Iowa's defense, they line up, they rush for, they run cover for, and they get on with it, right? It's kind of like Robert Saleh with the Jets, and sometimes DeMeco Ryans with the Texans, where it's like, okay, this is what they do, this is our base defense, and we're in it 90% of the time. And that's kind of how it was at Iowa. So Aaron Glenn, a lot more diverse in his defensive looks, especially his coverages. He'll mix up man and zone and rotations and do all sorts of different things and blitzing. Campbell, really, the one part that I saw for him in coverage especially was play action. Biting up on play action for sure is a big point of emphasis. Now that is something where, reading your keys and finding things mentally, mental fixes, obviously those are things you can work on. You can watch tape, you fix them in the offseason, fix them in practice. I think he's got every bit the athleticism to be able to cover. I don't think that's gone away. I think it's just there's a lot of the mental side of the game in coverage that he's got to work on in the middle of the field. And just, again, it's a more diverse defense than he played at Iowa. I could see a big jump from Campbell, especially if we fix, kind of like Devin Lloyd for Jacksonville, where it was like, okay, really struggled in coverage his rookie year and just had to find his way through the NFL game and all the schemes and everything teams throw at him. Because, look, more so than ever, offensive coordinators are so good at isolating one guy, especially in coverage, right? Whether it's RPOs, whether it's play action, whether it's all sorts of things are like, we're going at this guy. And last year, that guy was Campbell for stretches of games. So if he keeps the run D performance, we get an improvement in coverage like we saw more at Iowa. I think there could be a big jump, and he could take the leadership role in the middle of this defense.
My breakout candidate, and maybe you could think he was already a breakout candidate last year, but I think there's even more in the tank for Jahmyr Gibbs this year. I think sort of the obvious one that neither of us brought up is Jameson Williams. I think that Jameson Williams could certainly have a monster year coming up, but he's such a common breakout candidate that you guys have heard so much. We kind of wanted to give a little bit of a different angle here, and I wanted to go with Jahmyr Gibbs because Jahmyr, he had, I think it was just under 1,400, right around 1,400 all-purpose yards last year. I think that number's genuinely could be closer to 2,000 this year. What Jahmyr Gibbs can be for this team, I think, as just a dynamic weapon that they can use all around the field. And David Montgomery is still going to get his. I know they trust David Montgomery a lot. He had over 1,000 yards last year. He had over 200 carries, but I know this coaching staff looks at Gibbs, and it's not like they're going to give him all of the carries now, but they look at him and go, we are better when the ball is in his hands. So I think especially as a receiver, they're going to get him that work out of the backfield a lot more, knowing that ROI they could get, which is simple passes to him. Because that's the thing, too, is that a dynamic offense, it doesn't have to be high ADOT all the time. It does not have to be this long average depth of target. You're pushing it way deep down the field. Sometimes it can be as simple as, hey, little well-designed play where the defense doesn't see it coming, little dump off pass straight to Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's got all of this speed in space that he can work with. And I think that drafting more of those, we're going to see an even more efficient and explosive Jahmyr Gibbs this upcoming year. Like I said, I think the all-purpose yards, we're going to get a lot closer to 2,000 this year for Jahmyr Gibbs, at least if they feed him the rock the way that he could return them for. So what about a best rookie on this team? What do you got?
I think a couple more things on Gibbs real quick before I get to that. One, I was surprised when I looked all season last year when I was watching him. One of the best runners, people think of him as a speed and space player. One of the best rushing grades between the tackles last year of any player in the NFL. So that's encouraging. And I think the only thing that keeps maybe him from those big elite numbers, like those crazy numbers, is Dan Campbell coming up under the Sean Payton coaching tree. And this dynamic here reminds me so much of when the Saints had Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara both in New Orleans, where it was just like these two guys, they get even work, they get very different work, and there are times for me I would have them both on the field at the same time. I think that's such a dangerous package. If you had St. Brown, Williams, Laporta, and then the two backs on the field, I think that's as good a five as they can have out there. So I think Gibbs is a great call, and I think it's to play the Kamara role in that kind of dynamic duo there. I think it's a perfect call out. As far as the best rookie goes, for me, I'm really going to name two guys because I love their first two draft picks and what it solves for them and the talent of these guys. Terrion Arnold first and Ennis Rakestraw. Arnold I'll get into, 88.4 overall grade last season. That was the sixth best in the Power 5 among all corners. Led the Power 5 in run defense grade. This is a dog, man. Terrion Arnold, you watch him and you're just like, man, I just love the way he plays and love how aggressive he plays. There's sometimes where it's like, it's just he might be the most aggressive player on the field, and he's maybe 200 pounds playing corner, right? 5 interceptions, 13 pass breakups last year. Ball hawk, super aggressive tackler. I just love everything he brings. I'm curious, too. I know they got a Meek Robertson, but I'm curious if Arnold gets some work in the slot as well because he looked very comfortable there at Alabama. But what I like the most, and I'm going to bring up Rakestraw here, too, and then you have Davis and you have Robertson, is they brought in a diverse set of players too, right? Aaron Glenn, there was a time when Aaron Glenn just wanted to run a boatload of man coverage, but I think he's diversified that over the last year and a half or so, and that's come with a jump in their defensive production. And you have Arnold, who's like a super aggressive. He can play in man, he can tackle, Carlton Davis has been in a man system for a long time with Todd Bowles. Meek Robertson with a heavy zone system in Vegas, and then Ennis Rakestraw too, one of the best zone corners in the country at Missouri. They played a lot of 3 and 4 at Missouri.
Yes.
Big corner, aggressive corner, same thing, excellent tackler, but he's really good in kind of off coverage. So I think a dynamic very much like in Kansas City, how they have say Jalen Watson and Josh Williams for kind of different situations, right? Like to me, I watch Jalen Watson, he's great in cover 2. I watch Josh Williams, he can play man-to-man. I watch Trent McDuffie, he go inside. And I think he's starting to build that dynamic with the depth of this team. Maybe they don't have a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley, but I think the number of different players you have in this second. Then you have Brian Branch, who can just do anything, literally. Yep. And then you have Melifonwu, too, who can do just about anything. Blitzer, drop deep half, wherever you want. I think the amount of diversity in this secondary is as valuable as the amount of talent. I think Aaron Glenn's going to have a lot of fun with it, especially with both Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw in that mix. They're just as important to me as the two veteran guys that they picked up.
I think that you summed it up perfectly. Obviously, I touched on the Lions coverage and how much they need people to step up on the outside and the inside as well. You mentioned the slot. I think that Branch kind of has that slot rolled down, but having a rotation, I think that makes a ton of sense for them as well, especially a team that's trying to get a deep playoff run and a Super Bowl run. But I just echo everything that you said. Terrion Arnold is also my team's best rookie, but Ennis Rakestraw Jr., I am with you. I loved the fact that this team went back-to-back cornerbacks. Despite getting a Meek Robertson, despite trading for Carlton Davis, right, they still attacked their weakness as much as they possibly could to make sure that it's better. I think that not only does it work for them here in the short term, I now think they have the long term of their cornerback set up with both of those guys too. So I think that's a great call out.